There's this common phrase uttered by a lot of really annoying people, namely me. The purpose of a story is not that it ends, yet why do we focus on the ending so much? Hi, I'm Arthur. I'm an overly pretentious pseudo-intellectual, and today in the Bone Zone we're gonna talk about how bad things can get if GW ever loses their goddamn mind and decides to take 40k out behind the shed and AOS them like they did to Fantasy. It isn't really normally a thing I like to think about, because, I mean, if GW decides to kill off 40k and make the mechanics more simple so that children can play it, I feel like the world would explode. I might be being a little hyperbolic, but normally I do these things called lore dives, where I just go on and do a little bit of a wiki walk, and I do lists of books out of the citations at the bottom of the page to see where I should start reading. I'm going through a bunch of White Dwarf magazines and a bunch of people talking about them. It's pretty fun. Now, recently, I've realized that a fun topic to discuss is definitely that the setting would look interesting if we lost. And no, losers, I don't care if you play Tyranids. When I say we, I mean the Imperium, because if you look down, no matter how hard you try or read Kafka, you will not become a bug. So I wanted to break down the biggest threats to mankind, who could win, why they would win, and what would happen if they did. I'll probably go from best to worst possible fates imaginable for humanity if they did win, but before I do, let's disqualify a few people here from the rankings. One, Leagues of Votann. They literally have no reason to kill an entire species, and they don't really care about the Imperium that much, and even like working with them from time to time. Two, Gene Stealer cults, because, well, they're just Tyranids, so Tyranids are already going to be on this list, so might as well just talk about them there. Three, the Eldar and secondary Eldar species, because the Eldar don't really care that much about humanity. They more just are focused on them surviving to the next day, and don't really want to kill them all, because they're a useful tool when dealing with chaos. And I feel like it'd be weird. The Drukhari can't really kill humans because they need them for torture slaves and so on. So with that out of the way, you should all be praying as it's about to get bumpy. Drink some gamer subs using code BONEZONE for 10% off, and let's hop into it. The first and easiest to quantify is the Tau, as they are a faction that wants to conquer the universe, control it, if you will. But the thing is, if the Imperium lost against them, wouldn't even be that bad of a thing. In all honesty, you'd probably get a quality increase in your life on average, but there is a lot of Orwellian nonsense that you're going to have to turn a blind eye to. Likely mass sterilization, forced military service, a literal caste system where whatever caste you are brought into dictates your purpose in life, and if you speak out, you will likely be black-bagged, scurried away, and unlike the Imperium that is open about turning corpses into food, I feel the Tau probably do it in secret, and that's what's going to happen to you if you couldn't. I hope the logic through line there kind of track. You would probably be safer on average, but here's the thing. How do the Tau do it? How do they win? Well, for now, if I remember correctly, they don't have access to warp travel, which is the faster than light travel that the majority of the universe kind of needs in order to get by. So getting to Sol to conquer the Imperium is going to be a bit of a challenge, as they're going to have to fight every single chapter of Space Marines in a straight line to get there. But in this hypothetical, the Tau would probably do two things. One, have developed a super soldier program akin to the Space Marines in order to be able to beat them, because the Tau do have superior tech to the Imperium of Mankind, but with superior soldiers, they can actually, have a chance of getting past them. I remind you, for all their benefits, their high tech, their scopes, their sniper rifles, and the fact that every single guy is armed with a rifle that can probably hit you a kilometer away, the Tau in-game still hit on 4s, almost universally with ranged, and Space Marines still hit on 3s, and there's a reason for that. So, doing that, they would conquer the Sol system, which I feel would be relatively easy. As for the biggest hurdle, other than Space Marines and the Custodies, would be Mars, and they would just state, hey, we will give you free access to experiment with technology as you see fit. Also, look at this shit that we've made. And it would appease the shard of the Catan that is hidden under the Noctis Labyrinthus, and that thing's desire for technology. So that would take away the Imperium's biggest benefit, meaning they would just have a straight shot to get to Terra, and they would just deal with the Custodies as they would normally any threat that they can't deal with close up, and that is, orbital bombardment cement until it looks something like a parking lot covered in ash. Afterwards, they would mop up, install propaganda watercast systems on Terra, and then just go to town, spreading their influence, stealing the Imperium's navigators so that they could go warping around the universe, which, weirdly enough, now that I think about it, I feel like if they allied with the Imperium, or at least took it over and took all their assets, the Tau would be one of the most dangerous forces ever. Though Chaos would probably get installed pretty quickly, but whatever. And to be honest, it's pretty easygoing across the board for our species, though let's talk about the next worst fate imaginable so we can crank up the difficulty, you know? See who's the second worst to lose to. It's an orc victory. I'm not gonna beat around the bush here. Now, are these even close in scale? No, a Tau victory literally means that we are more or less just relatively happy indentured workers for eternity. Orc victory? We're all dead. It also requires a lot less explaining how the orcs could win. They just end up somehow developing one more brain cell than usual. There is this topic I want to cover on the channel, because I always thought it was an interesting thought experiment, and that is, have you ever guys heard of black orcs before? They are a thing in Warhammer Fantasy and the old world. There is quite literally no equivalent to them in 40k, because if there was, the setting would get a lot darker quicker, because black orcs were made using magic and selective breeding sciences that the Chaos Dwarves used on their orc servants, well, slaves, and they made them more intelligent, larger, and stronger, and they wanted them to be able to follow orders better. Unfortunately, that last sentence did not end with follow the orders of Chaos Dwarves more. So, yeah, you basically have these roaming gangs of military regiments of smart, large, and incredibly difficult to deal with orcs that can formulate tactics, understand that being armed properly means maintaining full plate rather than just wearing scraps of leather. And yeah, they also, most importantly, understand that sometimes you shouldn't run face first into the enemy, though I don't think they use ranged weapons, so there is also that. So for the orcs of 40k to win, I feel like they would need black orcs to appear, who would be able to eclipse space marines pretty easily, then overpower the Imperium. Now, for those of you who are being snarky, and I don't blame you, I am that way as well, you're probably saying, wouldn't that just be introducing Primaris orcs? No, shut up, let me cook. Black orcs in 40k would be more like custodies for orcs than it would be there. That is the difference. Plus, we all know that the Primaris orcs are just the beast snagga boys. You just like them more than the Primaris release because they didn't replace the basic boys, and also they have cute little pig squig that they ride into battle on. No, don't lie. I pogged too when I saw the little grot riding a tiny squig with a nail as his lance. It's very cute. Anywho, the story would literally just progress into them ending up on the doorstep of Terra, beating everything to death with sheer brute force, massacring the whole planet before probably breaking out into a civil war, as orcs is still orcs after all, and they like fighting. If they didn't have anyone to fight, they would probably just fight each other. Not into extinction, but they would fight and turn Terra into a battleground to end all battlegrounds, and people would probably avoid the Sol system more than they already do, which is a funny mental image, like 3 days tops of calm after killing all the humies, and then it's back to business. I think the other races, now no longer being held back by humanity's meddling, would be able to deal with them, and I feel Chaos will probably be a bit vindictive over taking away the main source of their magics for now, but like, you know, the whole cult thing is kind of important. Hi, hello. This is Arthur from after the video was finished to talk about something near and dear to all of our hearts. Me. I am everyone's favorite, lovable, huggable, and incredibly handsome 40k tuber who is limited by the fact that there is only one of me. I know, it's genuinely distressing, but what if I told you that there is the possibility of there being more of me at some point? Now, I know the clone trials are, going along slowly in my basement, but I have something just as good, if not better, a marketable plush of Arthur Bones. Thanks to the fellas at Makeship, there is a chance that a limited number of you could be lucky enough to own one of these lovely little guys. Right now, we are in the petition phase, and a little towards the end, kinda should have done this a little sooner, but whatever. With said petition ending Tuesday, and we need to hit 200 signatures in order to get this sucker potentially made. All you need to do is put down a $2 USD deposit. Sign up for one of these guys, and if we hit 200 signatures on the mark, next month you'll be charged for the total amount, which is $27.99 plus all the shipping and whatnot. After that, we go into the prototyping and production phase, and you'll eventually get your own little Arthur Bones plush. So, with that being said, if we don't hit the mark, you'll be refunded for the $2 and I'll just weep into my pillow, I guess. So, yeah, I really do actually want a plush to be put out. It'll be a cool benchmark for the channel. Something that Crack Duck, a good friend of the channel, did, and I think that it's time for us to kind of do the same. We can't let Crack Duck outshadow us, right? So, I hope to make this a reality. Fun fact, I actually really do love stuffed animals. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment and sign up for the makeshift to potentially get yourself an Arthur Bones stuffed animal plush, whatever. It would mean the world to me. And yeah, thanks again for your time, and let's get back to the end of the world, or whatever I was talking about. Let's move on to the darker fates here that are not just we all die, there's actually something that happens that makes it a little bit more grim. So, with that being said, Chaos is the one I think genuinely is the weirdest, because there is fundamentally 6 different types of chaos victory if they would destroy the entirety of the Imperium, and the universe would look kind of the same for each of them, but we'll get to that. So, let's go over all of them, starting with the most obvious, which is if one of the 4 chaos gods won the argument of whose dick is the biggest finally and took over the universe over the other 4, or 3. I mean, Malice, whatever. These are likely the least appealing of the chaos victories, as they would probably burn out relatively quickly. For one, we have Khorne, the most basic of all. See, Khorne victory would basically be like Orc victory, but with infinitely less replenishing supply of boys that pop up from spore clouds, and also a lot more demons. See, Khorne would probably wipe out the Imperium in the most basic way possible, literally the same way as the Orcs, but again, demons, hellish, literally just the worst shit ever, and it would probably end on Terra the same way it would with the Orcs, except with maybe 1 less day of calm, bringing it down to like 2 at most. Once the demons take on Big E and win, the rest of the planet is likely just going to explode with the amount of bloodletters that just pop into existence suddenly. But with all the humans in a state of perma-blood war, it can be a bit rough for Khorne to find blood, with all the blood that has been spilled being kind of all that's there. Next, let's talk about Tzeentch. Tzeentch would likely be in a similar vein, where they would inevitably fuck themselves over by running out of resources to power their infinite growth, but it would actually be a bit more interesting. See, Tzeentch isn't as short-sighted as Khorne and actually prefers to plan out what they do next, much to the chagrin of everybody else who plays 40k, or what have you. But I feel Tzeentch killing off the Imperium would mean, for one, they would have access to the Golden Throne, a piece of tech so charged with warp goop that they would likely plug in a fuckload of the bird demons to just see what happens and see if they can keep the Astronomicon up, but specifically for Tzeentch worshippers, which I don't know if you could do that, but if there's a will, there's a Tzeentch, so keep that in mind. It is basically a thing to channel more psychic energy into the universe and let non-stop Tzeentch demons into real space by creating sorcerer planets. Using humans as psychic conduits and resources for infinite chaos spawn, I feel Tzeentch would eventually cave in on themselves, because if there's one thing we all know, if you've ever read a single 40k book, that is that Tzeentch is basically an unending snake of betrayal consuming its own tail in order to feed itself. So at best, Tzeentch ruled Imperium, or whatever they would call it, probably something dumb. It would probably burn itself out, and at worst, it would probably just be an endless stalemate with itself, with no progress being made, just constant backstabbery. Slaanesh? Psst. I see dead people. Just put a giant sensor bar up here, and that's basically what would happen. And no, this isn't just like sex, drug, and rock and roll, haha. It's more like that one hell scene that they had to cut short in Event Horizon to actually get the movie released. Don't show that. If you know, you know, but if you don't look at it. It's actually very, very graphic. Just don't do it for anyone's sanity here. Something like that, yeah. Lastly, of the 4 gods, the one that I think would be the most interesting to have a single victory would probably be Nurgle. Nurgle would kill off the Imperium, but bring it back under his thrall, and weirdly enough, life would continue not as normal with him, but, you know, Grandpa Nurgle loves you and all that. There are actual plague planets in the universe where humans live, procreate, and populate it. And there was a joke in, I think, one of the Plague War books that the elders of a specific village on one of these plague planet cities were about 25 years old at max, because who would have thought that the life expectancy of the civilizations ruled by the plague god would be so low, but maybe it's just a mystery that time will solve. Regardless, Nurgle would likely wipe out all life on Terra with some kind of prolonged super disease and make it a barren rock to show anybody who would, defy him. With the addition of Primarch's blood, it has been proven in that same series that you can make a disease that can permakill gods. Now, to be fair, it was used on Rabute Gilliman, and with the help of the Emperor possessing his body, he was able to fight it off, so maybe it just wouldn't work on the Emperor, but with the help of maybe multiple different Primarchs, it would maybe be more potent. I mean, get Dorn's blood, Lion, L. Johnson's, and Gilliman, and use that to make another godblight that could actually kill the Emperor, and that's how it works. So this kind of flows to the end point of where all chaos would likely win, where it'd just be a bunch of plague planets that would run out of resources and then die. The singular god would never have a chance, because usually all three other gods band together to murder the fuck out of them afterwards and cast them out, and the cycle has always been as such. Chaos gods rise in power and fall as well. Though Nurgle is usually the one that's at least closest to the top most of the time, and for the longest, he too falls to that unfortunate 4th place spot every now and then due to big losses. Like, a lot of the Plague Garden was burned to a crisp by Gilliman, possessed by the Emperor, so how could Chaos have a more long-lasting, albeit not so much permanent, but long-lasting and more easily attainable victory? Easy. The last two chaotic forces that could potentially destroy the Imperium. Chaos Undivided, and usually what would come afterwards, True Chaos. Chaos Undivided is the 4 gods of chaos working together in small amounts, giving the benefits that they offer with very minimal drawbacks to a set group of individuals. That's the Black Legion shit that we're talking about, and this is basically to represent the ultimate victory of Chaos Space Marines, so we're just going to use this to be a catch-all for the Black Legion winning and slaughtering the Imperium like they've been wanting to. So, cut ahead for a while and have it be like Black Crusade number 45 or some shit. Abaddon finally does it. Kills off the Imperium. Emperor, gone. Imperial fists, fisted. Ultramarines, more like ultra dead. What happens next? Well, here is where we get to the problem with the Chaos victory, because that is what would happen. It would be just this massive black hole that would appear. Not a literal one, but a metaphorical one. See, Chaos as a concept appears in a reality, siphons out the soul's emotional energy, psychic energy, expands its domain in the warp, and then leaves that universe a dried up, decayed husk as they took all of its just life essence out. And then they move on to the next one, and then the next one. They are basically the Tyranids, but focused mainly on souls and psychic shit, rather than just meat. This is why the last two categories kind of go hand in hand, and why I said that True Chaos follows it. Sure, Abaddon would win, burn Terra to the ground, and look to start a new universe of people, but that's the thing. Chaos doesn't like stability. They like explosive, rampant growth and decay. They like extreme emotion. That's why it's chaotic. So this is when the actual victory of Chaos would come in, and that is True Chaos. See, Chaos needs people to fuel its growth. It needs souls. So what happens when the main enemy of Chaos and strife in this universe ends up dying off and succumbing to Abaddon's will? You get the final type, True Chaos. A chaos so intense and so vile that even Abaddon wouldn't be able to control it. It is a flame that will consume itself for warmth, with no other option to increase their souls. Chaos would begin to eat itself. Demons fighting people, people fighting people, demons fighting demons. I doubt even Abaddon would be able to control it. Him likely being torn apart by the 4 chaos gods for not choosing a side, which is going back to how a singular chaos god's victory would end. The Imperium is basically holding the line against chaos. The Eldar, they only really care about staying alive and also killing Slaanesh, but that's it. Everyone else, they usually just don't care. Hell, the Tyranids just try to avoid chaos whenever possible. So, with the Imperium truly gone, that would cause the fire to jump from the little bonfire of the two of these guys slugging it out all the time into the greater forest. Thus, the
the chaos cycle continues, and it will burn the universe down, burn itself out, and then find a new place to take root. Chaos is an endless cycle. It's one of the worst fates, but definitely not the worst fate, if you ask me. So now that we've covered chaos, let's get into the next major segment, which is me discussing the worst things that we could possibly lose to if they decided to make one final really big push. So, starting off, let's talk the Tyranids. See, I think the Tyranids would neither be quick nor easy. The Tyranids are definitely in the top 3 because they are insidious and impossible to stop if they get the ball rolling for long enough. The only reason we have been able to actually stop them as a collective is because we decided perhaps maybe being a smidge more proactive about these whole bug hunting things is probably an important thing to do, actively starving and hunting down splinter fleets before they regain any mass or are able to pick up any level of steam. But if a super fleet popped up and eliminated Terra, either through foregoing the biomass and bombing it into nothing but a bloody crater, or, God help us, consuming the God Emperor of mankind, which, let's not even consider that as a possibility. I don't even want to get into the speculation of what a Tyranid charged on Emperor goop would do, but I think that the only way that a Tyranid Hive Fleet could actually have the power to take over Terra would if they get a hold of Primarch DNA, which, as these fuckers pop up, is becoming more and more of a possibility. It's a little trite, yeah. Primarchs make things the most powerful they possibly can, but it does make sense. Overwhelming numbers of gene cults would be popping up all over the place in order to rally forces to amass enough resources to overwhelm Terra in one big invasion. No time to respond, even the Custodes wouldn't be able to intervene properly. If the Tyranids got rid of the Imperium, I'll say it, the universe is kind of fucked. Because humanity has been shown outside of the town to be the only race to actually be able to root or at least strike it neutral with the Tyranids. So without that, and with the resources acquired from the destruction of humanity, the Tyranids would basically do the chaos shakedown I mentioned before, where they would eventually burn themselves out. But here is where things get interesting. Unlike chaos, where the spirit of the universe would be tarnished and therefore you wouldn't be able to really get more things going on, the Tyranids would burn out by slowly consuming all the biomass and just through biological processes die off, leaving nothing but the bare building blocks of their life around. Now, I don't know if you know anything about chemistry, but with the right organic compounds in the mix, life can happen again. In short, if the Tyranids win against the Imperium of mankind, it would kind of be the grossest reintegration of the Big Bang that could have ever happened. They would die out and their corpses would eventually crash land on some planets, seeding them with life and biomass that would basically begin the cycle of life all anew. I think this shit's cool, but you know what isn't cool? The Necron. Yeah, you saw this coming, so let's talk about it. Now, the key feature of the worst fates that could happen to the universe as well as the Imperium after the defeat usually revolves around what actually happens to them. Not to get too pseudo-intellectual about it, but hey, did you guys know I have a second YouTube channel where I basically discuss horror stuff? Yeah, cool. Anywho, in a lot of Western-based horror, the horror and fear comes from death and dying or a painful end. The idea of being torn apart and having your mortal shell cast off is pretty ooky spooky, right? But the thing is, in a lot of Asian horror, particularly in Japan, death is in fact not the worst thing that can happen to you, far from it. In fact, permanent torture and pain for eternity because of simple mistakes is oftentimes the thing you see, and that kind of ties into the Necron. See, where the Tyranids would consume us, use our bodies and molecules to make new bodies, which is gruesome. A fate I'd say is worse than death, because you die potentially knowing that you are going to be used as just the raw building blocks for weapons to kill others. I will state that the fate that the Necron hold for us is probably worse, because if the Necrons win, they're going to be doing some shit that is significantly worse. What do I mean? Easy. The Necron don't want to kill us. Some of them do, but most of them want to harvest us. They want to use technology to return their minds and spirits into the bodies of living beings in order to become flesh again, with technology that is shown to do basically that in some aspects of the setting. Case in point, the Warhammer for Kids books. I know, I never thought it would come up again. So the Imperium would be destroyed, the Emperor snuffed out like the small flame he is amidst the onslaught of god-killing weapons, and in its place would be something far worse. People would be harvested, and their bodies
rewritten by the minds and spirits of Necron engrams. The Necron tier finally getting able bodies that are not going to die of some kind of disease or cancer from their over-radioactive sun. No, they now have the ability to remake their empire stronger than before. Their minds no longer shackled to the programs that they were before. They are now able to become creative and artistic again. The Necron would rebuild their empire by rewriting ours, using our sciences, our weapons, and their own technology. They will be able to prolong lives and basically build the kingdoms that they once coveted. I think humanity being stuck at the back of the minds of these Necron tier bodies would be a fate worse than death, and probably one of the worst things ever. Watching from this sunken place as someone pilots you that isn't you, prolonging your life with their mystical ancient tech and slowly eroding away all of the humanity that you once had into something different, something old, but something new. They will conquer the stars, but only for fleeting moments in the grand scale of the cosmos, because now that they are flesh, they have weakness, they have souls, they were now subject to chaos, and even though they have the ability to destroy chaos, or at least seal it off with the pylons, they will likely fall to the decadences and issues that all of humanity has been plagued with their entire existence. But above all, the fear of chaos removing us from existence, the Tyranids consuming us, the Necrons replacing us. You know what I fear more than any of that? The Halo stars. The Halo stars, and more specifically the Ghoul stars, have monsters that can wipe out vast swaths of humanity in almost an instant. They are alien threats that occupy a niche that even we as a species can't fully understand. The Cacoddominus, the Pale Wasting, the Crave, the Sloth, or whatever they're called. These are entities that exist in the corner of reality, on the fringes of our vision that we barely notice. You'll see a flicker from time to time in the narratives of 40K, where just on the corner of your vision you will see just the faint tendril of something unearthly, and sometimes it becomes significant, but most of the time it stays dormant. The Cacoddominus needing an entire chapter of the Black Templars, which is basically 6 chapters of Space Marines in one, to take it down, and God knows how many other resources, and it also ended up with the deaths of billions. We don't even fully know what the Pale Wasting was, but we know that it required the entirety of the Death Watch to deal with. The Crave? One Mega Crave can kill entire planets with a thought, and if you think that the Imperium is safe from threats like that, then you are crazy. I like the idea that this isn't even going to be stoppable. This is something that just one day the Imperium is there, and then the next it isn't. I like that as an idea because there's just a degree of cosmic horror to it. We still don't truly know who the Watcher in the Rain is. That's just some entity that destroyed an entire planet with storms one day. Yeah, that was kind of wild. I do want to cover the Ghoul Stars and all the weird alien bullshit that comes from there in depth at some point, but this is a tale for another time. I think if there was going to be something that was going to break down and destroy the Imperium of mankind, it would be itself and the overwhelming weight of its bureaucracy, starving out its people and destroying its government. But I think I could talk about that in its own video in and of itself. So what do you all think? Do you think the Imperium is ever going to fall and we're going to see the next phase of Warhammer 40k? Do you think the Emperor is going to die or be resurrected as like a Vulcan thing or what have you? Let me know in the comments what you think. And also, support the Makeship. Make this a thing. Duh. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me. With your help, I can do this and have fun doing it. If you want access to new content or even just bonus content, then become a channel member today. Thank you all once again for watching. And until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful night.